Jessica Collins sat by her bedroom window, watching raindrops race down the glass. The weather matched her mood, gloomy and unsettled. At 28, Jessica had always been the quiet one in the family, the observer who noticed things others missed. Her mom used to joke that she could read people like books, a skill that had served her well in her job as a small-town librarian. Her younger sister Lily, just 25, was the complete opposite, bubbly, trusting, and living life in the moment. That's why Jessica couldn't shake the worry that had settled in her stomach like a stone ever since Lily had brought home her new boyfriend 6 months ago. Robert Winters had swept into their lives like a storm. Handsome with perfect teeth and carefully styled hair, he worked as a pharmaceutical sales rep and always seemed to have a funny story or expensive gift. Their small town of Pine Grove had fallen under his spell, the charming outsider who'd captured sweet Lily's heart. "He's just so perfect," Lily had gushed over coffee last week, flashing her huge diamond ring for the 100th time. "I can't believe we're getting married in just 3 weeks." Jessica forced a smile and nodded, but the knot in her stomach tightened. She couldn't explain exactly what bothered her about Robert. It was more like tiny puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. Like how he claimed to have grown up in Seattle, but seemed confused when Jessica mentioned famous landmarks there. Or how he told Lily's best friend he was an only child, but had shown Jessica pictures of his sister's kids a month earlier. Then there were the phone calls. Robert always stepped outside to take them, his voice dropping to whispers. Once, Jessica had walked around the corner of her parents' house during a family barbecue and found him speaking harshly into his phone. "Just handle it, okay? I don't care how. I'll have the money soon." When he spotted her, his face transformed instantly back into the charming smile everyone loved. Worst of all was how Lily had changed. She'd stopped meeting her friends for Thursday night movies. She'd quit her volunteer work at the animal shelter she'd loved for years. And last month, she'd even missed her best friend's birthday party because Robert suddenly planned a weekend trip. "You're just imagining things," Jessica's mom said when she tried to voice her concerns. "You've always been too suspicious of people. Robert is successful and crazy about Lily. Why can't you just be happy for your sister?" Her dad had patted her shoulder awkwardly. "Honey, not every guy is going to be like Dave." Jessica winced at the mention of her ex who'd cheated on her 2 years ago. Was that all this was? Her own trust issues coloring how she saw Robert. But last week, something happened that Jessica couldn't ignore. She'd stopped by Lily's apartment with soup when her sister had texted about feeling sick. Using the spare key, she'd let herself in when no one answered her knock. The apartment was empty, but Robert's laptop sat open on the coffee table. A notification popped up, an email with the subject line, "Property sale finalized. Wire transfer details." Jessica shouldn't have looked, but something pushed her to click it. The email showed Robert had sold Lily's rental property, the small house their grandmother had left her. But Lily had never mentioned selling it. In fact, she'd always talked about keeping it forever as a memory of Grandma Rose. Jessica heard keys in the door and quickly closed the laptop. Robert walked in, surprise flashing across his face before that perfect smile appeared. "Jessica, what a nice surprise. Lily just ran to the store for medicine. Should be back any minute." But Jessica had seen Lily's car wasn't in its usual spot. And as Robert chatted casually about wedding plans, Jessica noticed something else. A smudge of lipstick on his collar, bright red. A shade her sister never wore. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and Jessica's worry had turned to real fear. But every time she tried to talk to someone, they dismissed her as the jealous older sister. She needed proof before it was too late. Jessica couldn't sleep. The digital clock on her nightstand flipped to 2:17 a.m. as she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with worries about Lily and Robert. The wedding was now just 13 days away. She'd tried talking to her sister again yesterday, only to be met with tears and accusations. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" Lily had cried. "Everyone else loves Robert. What's wrong with you?" The words stung, but Jessica couldn't let it go. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. Her laptop chimed with a new email notification. Strange for this hour, she thought, reaching over. The subject line made her sit up straight. "About Robert to Winters, energy and..." The sender's address was a jumble of numbers and letters. Probably spam, she told herself, but her finger hovered over the delete button before clicking to open it. "I don't know you," the message began, "but I think you're Jessica, Lily's sister. I saw your picture on her social media. I have information about the man she's planning to marry. He's not who he says he is. Check the attachments." Jessica's hands trembled as she downloaded the files. The first was a newspaper article from a small town in Oregon, dated 3 years ago. The headline read, "Local woman left penniless after husband disappears." The grainy photo showed a smiling couple on their wedding day. The man's face made Jessica's blood run cold. It was Robert, with different hair and glasses, but unmistakably him. The article called him Richard Weldon. The second file contained a similar story from Idaho 18 months ago. Another woman, another wedding, another disappearance, this time with nearly $200,000 from joint accounts. The name was Ronald Wallace, but the face belonged to Robert. Jessica clicked through more files with growing horror, police reports, social media screenshots, and even a warning bulletin from a small-town sheriff's department. The same pattern repeated: charming man, whirlwind romance, marriage, disappearance, emptied bank accounts. The final attachment made her gasp out loud, a mugshot of Robert, labeled Richard Wells, wanted for fraud and identity theft in 3 states. The file included arrest records showing he'd been caught once but jumped bail and disappeared again. "Who are you really?" she whispered to the screen, staring at Robert's face. Dawn was breaking when Jessica finally composed a reply to the anonymous sender. "Who are you? How did you find me?" The response came minutes later. "I'm Amy. He was engaged to my cousin Diane in Colorado last year. She killed herself after he took everything and disappeared. I've been tracking him since, trying to warn others. I found your sister's engagement announcement online. Please stop this wedding." Jessica's phone rang, startling her. It was her mother, calling about wedding flower arrangements. Jessica listened numbly, unable to form words around the lump in her throat. "Honey, are you there?" her mother asked. "Mom, I need to tell you something about Robert." "Oh, Jessica, not this again. Your father and I are tired of your jealousy. If you can't be supportive, maybe you shouldn't be the maid of honor." The words hit like a slap. Her own parents wouldn't even listen. After hanging up, Jessica stared at the evidence spread across her desk. She needed more, something her family couldn't ignore. Showing them these files wouldn't be enough. Robert would just claim it was someone who looked like him, or that the images were fake. She needed concrete proof that connected Robert Winters to these other identities: bank records, phone numbers, addresses. Jessica had never done anything remotely illegal in her life, but as she picked up her phone to call her childhood friend Tyler, who now worked in computer security, she knew she was crossing a line. "Tyler, it's Jessica. I need your help with something complicated. Can you come over? It's about Lily. I think she's in real danger." She looked again at the mugshot of Robert, at the cold calculation in his eyes so different from the warmth he showed her sister. 13 days until the wedding. The clock was ticking. Tyler arrived at Jessica's apartment 40 minutes later with a laptop under his arm and dark circles under his eyes. His usually tidy brown hair stuck up in all directions, and his rumpled t-shirt suggested he'd thrown on yesterday's clothes. "This better be important," he said, setting up his computer on her kitchen table. "I was up all night finishing a security audit." "It's about Lily's fiancé," Jessica said, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. "I think he's dangerous." Tyler's eyebrows shot up as Jessica spread out the printed emails and articles. He listened without interrupting as she explained everything: her suspicions, the anonymous email, the evidence pointing to Robert's multiple identities. "So you want me to? What exactly?" Tyler asked when she finished. "Help me find proof that Robert Winters is actually this Richard Wells person, something my family can't ignore." Tyler rubbed his eyes. "Jess, what you're asking is technically illegal. I could lose my job." "I know." Jessica's voice cracked. "But my sister could lose everything, maybe even her life. Please, Ty. I don't know who else to ask." Their eyes met across the table. They'd been friends since 4th grade when Tyler had stood up to the boys who made fun of Jessica's thick glasses. Now she was asking him to risk his career. 5 days, he finally said. The wedding's in 5 days, right? Let me see what I can find. For the next 72 hours, they barely slept. Tyler set up specialized programs to run background checks while Jessica contacted the police departments mentioned in the articles. Most officers were hesitant to share information, but a detective in Oregon remembered the case. Yeah, that scumbag Richard Weldon, the detective said over the phone. Left Penny Hansen with nothing but debt after 6 months of marriage. We never caught him. Jessica's heart pounded as she asked, "Could you email me his file photo? I think he might be engaged to my sister under a different name." The photo arrived an hour later, unmistakably Robert with darker hair. Meanwhile, Tyler had made a breakthrough. "Look at this," he said, pointing to his screen. "Robert Winter's social security number only has records going back 3 years. It's a stolen identity." "From who?" Jessica asked, leaning closer. "A kid who died at age 4, 30 years ago. Classic identity theft move." Tyler pulled up another window. "And I found something else. Your sister's recent bank statements." Jessica frowned. "How did you get those?" "Don't ask." Tyler scrolled through the document. "See these transfers? Small amounts, all going to different accounts. Then those accounts funnel the money to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." "But Lily would notice money missing," Jessica protested. "Not if he's only taking small amounts. Plus, look, he opened a joint account with her last month. He's got access to everything." Jessica's stomach dropped. "Her inheritance from Grandma Rose." "Exactly, and there's more." Tyler pointed to another screen. "He's booked a cabin in the mountains for their honeymoon, but he's also purchased a one-way ticket to Brazil leaving from a small airport near their cabin. Just one ticket, Jess. Departing at 6 a.m. the day after they arrive." The implication hit Jessica like a physical blow. She sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. He's planning to disappear again. After he gets her money. "Or worst," Tyler said quietly. "That detective you talked to. I looked into those other cases. 2 of his previous wives disappeared completely. Their bodies were never found." The room seemed to spin around Jessica. She'd been worried about her sister's broken heart and empty bank account. Now she was terrified for Lily's life. "We need to go to the police," Tyler said. "With what?" Jessica's voice shook. "Everything we have was obtained illegally. They'll never get a warrant in time." Her phone chimed with a text from her mother. "Final dress fitting tomorrow at 10. Don't be late again." Jessica stared at her cluttered kitchen table. Evidence spread out like puzzle pieces forming a terrifying picture. The wedding was now just 2 days away. Jessica's hands trembled as she arranged the printouts on her parents' dining room table. The fancy china that only came out for special occasions had been pushed aside to make room for bank statements, police reports, and identity theft documentation. Her mother hovered nearby, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "This better be important," her father said, checking his watch. "We have the rehearsal dinner in 3 hours." "It is," Jessica promised. "Just wait until everyone gets here." The doorbell rang, and her mother hurried to answer it. Voices drifted from the entryway. Lily's excited chatter, followed by Robert's deep laugh. Jessica's stomach knotted as they entered the dining room. "What's all this?" Lily asked, her smile fading as she spotted the papers. "Family meeting," Jessica said, her mouth dry. "Please just sit down and listen." Tyler slipped in through the back door as everyone took seats around the table. He gave Jessica a small nod, moral support from the kitchen doorway. "I've discovered something about Robert," Jessica began, her voice steadier than she felt. "He's not who he claims to be." Robert's expression didn't change, but Jessica noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table. "Not this again," Lily groaned. "Mom, Dad, tell her to stop." "Just hear me out," Jessica pleaded, pushing the first document forward. "This is a police report for a man named Richard Wells, wanted in Oregon for fraud. This is his photo." She pointed to the grainy image. "It's Robert." Her father picked up the paper, squinting at it. "That's ridiculous," Robert said with a laugh. "That barely looks like me." "What is this, some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke," Jessica continued, heart pounding. "You've done this before, 6 times that we know of. You marry women, steal their money, and disappear. She spread out more documents. These are bank records showing transfers from Lily's accounts to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Her mother gasped, but Robert was already shaking his head. This is absurd, he said, turning to Lily's parents with an injured expression. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, I've tried to be patient with Jessica's issues, but this is going too far. Issues? Jessica echoed, anger rising. I have proof, Dad. His social security number belongs to someone who died 30 years ago. His work history is fabricated, and he's been steadily draining Lily's inheritance into hidden accounts. Her father frowned, studying the documents more closely. For a moment, Jessica felt a flicker of hope. Then Robert reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. I can clear this up right now, he said, extracting several cards. Here's my driver's license, social security card, and passport, all legitimate. Feel free to call the pharmaceutical company I work for. They'll confirm everything. He slid the cards across the table. Jessica stared at them, her mind racing. They looked real, professionally made. Of course they would be. He'd done this many times before. As for these bank transfers, Robert continued smoothly, Lily and I are investing in our future home. She's been handling all of it. Tell them, honey. Lily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. It's true. I've been moving money into our house fund. Jessica, how could you do this? How could you hack into my private accounts? Jessica felt the room tilting. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Lily, he's lying to you. The cabin he booked for your honeymoon, he bought a one-way ticket to Brazil leaving the morning after you arrive. Just one ticket. That's for a surprise, Robert said quickly. I was going to arrange a day trip for Lily to see the rainforest. It was supposed to be a wedding gift. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. I can't believe you'd go this far, she said to Jessica. You've always been jealous of anyone I date, but this is unforgivable. Jessica's father stood up, gathering the papers. I think we've heard enough, he said firmly. Jessica, I'm disappointed in you. These accusations are serious and completely unfounded. But Dad? No buts. You will apologize to Robert and to his sister right now, or you're not welcome at the wedding. Jessica looked from face to face, her father's disappointment, her mother's embarrassment, Lily's hurt, and behind it all, Robert's eyes, cold with triumph. I'm sorry, she whispered, not to Robert, but to her sister. I'm so sorry. As Robert led a crying Lily from the room, he paused beside Jessica. I understand you were just worried about your sister, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Then, his voice dropping so only she could hear, he added, try that again, and you'll regret it. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself was mocking Jessica's dark mood. She sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection in the mirror as she pinned up her hair. The bridesmaid dress hung on her closet door, pale blue, Lily's favorite color. After the disastrous family meeting, Jessica had barely slept for 2 nights straight. Her parents were hardly speaking to her, and Lily had asked their cousin Beth to take over most of the maid of honor duties. The only person still firmly on her side was Tyler, who had spent the past 48 hours digging even deeper into Robert's background. You have to be there, Tyler had insisted during their late-night phone call. We still don't have proof that will convince them, but I'm close. Just play along and keep your eyes open. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Car picking you up in 20 minutes. Please be on your best behavior today. With a sigh, Jessica finished her makeup and slipped into her dress. The weight of what might happen today pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. If she did nothing, her sister would marry a dangerous con man. If she tried to stop it without solid proof, she'd be cut off from her family completely. The church looked like something from a fairy tale. White roses and lilies decorated every pew, and soft music filled the air as guests filed in. Jessica's heels clicked on the marble floor as she made her way to the small room where Lily was getting ready. She paused outside the door, gathering her courage before knocking softly. Come in, Lily called. Jessica's breath caught at the sight of her sister in her wedding gown. Lily looked radiant, their grandmother's pearl necklace gracing her throat, her eyes bright with excitement. You look beautiful, Jessica said quietly. Lily's smile faltered. I didn't think you'd come. I'll always be there for you, Lily, no matter what. Something passed between them, a flicker of their old closeness. Then their mother bustled in with the photographer, and the moment was gone. The ceremony began right on schedule. Jessica sat in the front row beside her parents, hands clenched tightly in her lap. Robert stood at the altar looking handsome and completely at ease. Of course he did, Jessica thought bitterly. He'd done this before. Her phone vibrated in her small clutch purse. Careful to shield the screen from her father's view, she checked the message from Tyler. Go take it, solid proof. Police records from Nevada. Call this detective now. A phone number followed. Jessica slipped out during a hymn, ducking into a side hallway to make the call. The detective answered on the second ring. This is Detective Morales. My name is Jessica Collins, she said in a rush. My friend Tyler Park gave me your number. It's about Richard Wells. He's about to marry my sister under the name Robert Winters. Wells? The detective's voice sharpened. Where are you? Pine Grove Community Church. The wedding started 10 minutes ago. Listen carefully, he said. We've been tracking Wells for 3 years. He's wanted for questioning in the disappearance of 2 women, both former wives. I'm 3 hours away, but I can contact local police. Don't confront him. He's dangerous. Jessica's hands trembled as she ended the call. 3 hours would be too late. The ceremony would be over. They'd be gone. She slipped back into the church just as the minister said, if anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The church fell silent. Jessica felt every eye turned toward her, expecting trouble from the difficult older sister. Her father's warning glare was unmistakable. But in that moment, all Jessica could see was her little sister, trusting and vulnerable, about to pledge her life to a monster. Jessica stood up. Her legs felt like water as she stepped into the aisle, ignoring the gasps and murmurs that rippled through the congregation. I have something to say, she said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. She reached into her purse for the manila envelope Tyler had delivered to the church that morning. And this time, everyone needs to listen. The church fell silent as Jessica walked toward the altar, her blue bridesmaid dress rustling with each step. She could feel her father's angry glare burning into her back, her mother's horrified gasp, the hundreds of eyes watching her every move. But it was Robert's face that caught her attention, the flash of pure hatred quickly masked by confusion and concern. Jessica, please, Lily whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Don't do this. Jessica's hands shook as she opened the manila envelope. I wouldn't do this if I didn't have real proof, proof that can't be explained away. She pulled out the first document. This came from the Nevada State Police Department this morning. The minister looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Jessica said firmly. Everyone needs to hear this. She turned to face the guests. The man standing at this altar is not Robert Winters. His real name is Richard Wells, and he's wanted in 5 states for fraud, identity theft, and, her voice caught, for questioning in the disappearance of 2 women who were once his wives. Gasps echoed through the church. Robert's face darkened. This is ridiculous, he said, reaching for the paper. Another one of her fabrications. It's not fabricated, Jessica cut in, pulling out more documents. Detective Morales from the Nevada State Police sent these official records. Your fingerprints match those of Richard Wells, who was arrested in Las Vegas 3 years ago. The detective is on his way here now. Robert's eyes darted toward the exit. Jessica caught the movement and stepped between him and the side door. But that's not all, she continued, her voice growing stronger. She removed a small digital recorder from the envelope. This is a conversation between Robert, or Richard, and his partner, recorded yesterday at the hotel bar during the rehearsal dinner. She pressed play, and Robert's voice filled the church. It's all set. Joint accounts are ready. I've got access to everything. After the ceremony, we drive to the cabin. By morning, it'll look like a tragic accident. Bride falls from cliff on honeymoon. Very sad. I'll be the grieving husband for a day, then gone. Meet you in Rio next week with the cash. A different voice answered. What about the sister? She's still causing trouble. She'll be dealt with after, same way as the others. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Lily had gone pale, one hand pressed to her mouth in horror. Robert lunged forward suddenly, grabbing for the recorder. You lying little. Jessica's father, a former football player in his college days, moved with surprising speed for a man in his 60s. He caught Robert's arm mid-swing. "Don't you touch my daughter," he growled, twisting Robert's arm behind his back. Robert broke free with unexpected strength, shoving Jessica's father aside. He grabbed Lily's arm. "We're leaving. Now." "Let her go," Jessica's father shouted, pulling his phone from his pocket. His fingers shook as he dialed. "This is Thomas Collins. I need police at Pine Grove Community Church immediately. There's a wanted man here threatening my daughters." Chaos erupted as Robert backed toward the door, using Lily as a shield. Some guests screamed, others pulled out phones to record the scene. The minister tried to calm everyone down, his pleas lost in the commotion. Jessica's Uncle Pete, who worked as a security guard, approached slowly. "Let her go, son. Police are on their way. Don't make this worse." Robert's eyes were wild now, all pretense gone. "Stay back. I'll hurt her if you come closer." Lily met Jessica's eyes across the church. In that moment, something passed between the sisters, a lifetime of shared secrets, fights, makeups, and trust. With a quick nod to Jessica, Lily suddenly went limp, dropping her full weight down. Caught by surprise, Robert's grip loosened just enough. Jessica rushed forward as her uncle tackled Robert from behind. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. "You ruined everything," Robert spat at Jessica as Uncle Pete and two male cousins pinned him to the ground. "I had it all planned perfectly." Jessica helped Lily to her feet, holding her trembling sister close. "It's over," she whispered. "You're safe now." The church doors burst open as police officers rushed in, weapons drawn. The local newspaper ran the story on their front page: "Wedding Day Drama. Bride saved from dangerous con man." For weeks, it was all anyone in Pine Grove could talk about. Jessica couldn't go to the grocery store without someone stopping her to ask for details or call her a hero. But the aftermath wasn't as simple as the headlines made it seem. After the police had handcuffed Robert, or Richard as they now knew him, and led him away, Lily had collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing in her ruined wedding dress. The guests had been sent home with hurried apologies, the caterers told to donate the food to a local shelter. The perfect day had become a nightmare, and though everyone knew Jessica had done the right thing, the pain was still raw. "She won't talk to me," Jessica told Tyler as they sat on her apartment balcony 3 weeks after the failed wedding. The evening air was cool, and she pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "Mom says she just stays in her room most days." "Give her time," Tyler said, passing her a cup of hot chocolate. "Finding out the man you loved was planning to kill you, that's not something you get over quickly." Jessica nodded, watching the steam rise from her mug. The police had found more evidence in Robert's hotel room: detailed plans of the mountain cabin, information about tides and currents at the base of the cliff near their honeymoon spot, and fake passports. Detective Morales had called it the most methodical murder plan I've seen in 20 years of police work. "The worst part is knowing this isn't the first time he's done it," Jessica said quietly. "They're reopening the investigations into his other wives' disappearances. Those poor women." Her phone rang, her father's ringtone. Jessica had been surprised by how quickly her parents had come around after the initial shock. Her father had actually apologized, gruffly admitting that he should have listened to her concerns earlier. "Dad? Everything okay?" "Lily's asking for you," he said without preamble. "Can you come over?" 20 minutes later, Jessica stood hesitantly in the doorway of her childhood home. Her mother met her with a quick hug. "She's in the sunroom. Go on back." Lily sat curled in the window seat, a blanket around her shoulders despite the warm day. She looked smaller somehow, her face thinner, dark circles under her eyes. When she saw Jessica, she straightened slightly. "Hey," Jessica said softly, taking a seat opposite her sister. "Hey." Lily's voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't used it much lately. "I've been thinking about what to say to you for weeks, and now I don't know where to start." "You don't have to say anything." "Yes, I do." Lily took a deep breath. "You saved my life, Jess, and I treated you horribly for it. I'm so sorry." Jessica blinked back sudden tears. "You didn't know. He fooled everyone." "Not you." Lily's eyes glistened. "You saw through him from the beginning." "How?" Jessica thought about it. Little things that didn't add up. the way he changed around different people. But mostly, he didn't look at you the way someone who really loves you should look at you. Silence fell between them, comfortable this time. The detective called yesterday, Lily said finally. They found remains near the cabin where one of his previous wives disappeared. They think there might be more. She shuddered. That could have been me. Jessica reached across the space between them and took her sister's hand. But it wasn't. You're safe. Because of you. Lily squeezed her fingers. I don't know if I'll ever trust my own judgment again. You will. Just give yourself time to heal. Outside, spring flowers had begun to bloom in their mother's garden, new life after a long winter. 6 months later, at Jessica's birthday dinner, Lily would bring a date. A kind-eyed teacher from her school, whom she'd known for years before Robert came into her life. She would introduce him to Jessica first, seeking her approval with a small smile. But that was still in the future. For now, the sisters sat together in the sunlit room, holding hands as they began the slow work of healing. And when Lily whispered, "I love you, sis. Thank you for saving me," Jessica knew that despite everything they'd been through, their bond had emerged stronger than ever.